Hi, very good afternoon to you. It's Jim from maverickstar Observatory. Guys, we're going to talk about the history of this magnetic reversal. So we're going to be going back 120 years at least to where the poles was situated for 780,000 years. There has been some excursions in that time period, but they have never been completed and they've always reverted back to their original positions. Before we get into the video, I'm going to keep it very short here. There will be a link mentioned at the end of the video, and if you want to, it's not mandatory, you can make a donation. And it would be, really great if a few more people would just step up and, support what we're trying to do, because we're going to keep people informed as much as we can for as long as we can. I think that's enough said about that. We'll just mention the link at the end of it. The only other thing to say is, kudos to those that have supported us in the last few days and also joined us on our little team that we've got going on Patreon. Okay, so what we're looking at are the pin marks originating from the 1900s. This is where the pole started to migrate, and a bit later on in this video you're going to realise a few things of importance, because I'm going to move the video as we're going along here, and I know it's going to be out of sync with the audio, but I'm just going to take us up to the previous day. And what you'll notice, if you stop the video at any point, you'll notice that something's been happening recently over the last 30 years. What that is that it's been covering more distance in a shorter space of time. And of course there's a lot more pin marks at the end here as we reach that all important 40 degrees, which I'm sure we're going to achieve in just the next magnetic pole positioning upload that we do in around about 5 or so days. I'm going to just carry on and zoom out here so that we can see where the poles are heading. You can see we've got a corridor of a white and a yellow line. Here's that mark, NASA, ESA, NOAA, which I promise you I will talk about at a later date. But here we can see the new North Pole position, where it's going to be. And the reason why we know that is because we know that where that pin mark is on Google Maps is also the epicenter of the strongest magnetic intensity over the northern hemisphere. It is because of this intensity and its level of intensity that the magnetic pole has been snatched away from Canada for that period of time that it has remained there. So we're talking a lot, if we just look at the last excursion, we're talking at least 12,000 years. If we're talking completed reversals, obviously we're talking a lot longer time period, 780,000 years. Now I mentioned just briefly that before 780,000 years, our Earth used to go through regular cycles of magnetic reversals, completed ones that was, and they would take place every 300 to 350,000 years. Now I want to pull up a chart. It's a few years out of date, but you'll get the picture, and this will become very important in a very short while in this video. So let's go and have a look at that. So this is the chart I wanted to show you, and it's going to become relevant in just a short while. So this is the North Pole migration over years, these miles, and what we will see from there, from 1900 to 1960, we see a slow progressive migration over that period of time. Then there is like a gear shift. It goes up a gear, covers more distance from the 1960s to the 1990s. And then there is a noticeable difference, because from the 1900s to the 1990s, it's covered just 500 miles. And then from 1990 to, on this chart, only goes up to just about 2018, it's covered 1,000 miles. So in 30 years, it has covered twice the amount of distance than what it did from 1900s to 1990. So in 90 years, it covered 500 miles, and in the last 30 odd years, it has covered over 1,000. In total, we are over 1,000 years of migration, or sorry, 2,000 years of migration in that period of time going back to the 1900s. Now, we've started to notice over the last 33 years, let's say, some significant changes in our climate, which is a breaking point, or it is almost like, a thermocline. You get to a certain point and there is stark noticeable differences, and I'm going to, on that basis, just show you something else. So I'm going to run the video in just a short while. Obviously this is a mission that is underway at the moment by NASA. Just look at the title: Martian Atmosphere Loss Explained by NASA. Now I'll run the video so you can see what is going on in this video while we're talking. We'll just press play. So it's going to be showing you the effects of a term called sputtering, and it's talking about the mission obviously, but a bit later on in this video you're going to see what actually happens when the magnetosphere of a planet starts to weaken. Basically we end up with a term called sputtering, and that is a stripping off of the upper atmosphere due to solar erosion or solar winds, and what that results in is a thinner thinner atmosphere. And the reason why this is because we have a weakened magnetosphere that protects us. So first of all, the magnetosphere weakens. In this case, we know that our magnetosphere is weakened between 22 and 25%, which is a quarter of its potential protective force, and as a result we have sustained a loss of our atmosphere through sputtering, as you've seen in this video. NASA are fully aware of the effects of what are taking place. Now I want to mention the other day, just to remind you, when we was talking about, you can go out on the afternoon on a nice hot sunny day, but the heat doesn't last in the evening like it used to about 30 years ago, noticeably. And a lot of you agreed. You said, yeah, you're right. As soon as 7 o'clock comes on the evening, you feel like if you're outside you need to put a jumper on or a cardigan on to keep warm. The power is just not sustaining of that heat that we used to get. But there's also something else that you'll probably also be familiar with. That is just one of the things that's happening, and that could be related to the fact that we are approaching that thermocline, going back into a glacial period. But talking about the magnetosphere being affected by the weakening poles on our planet, because we're in a transition at the moment of a reversal, or maybe even an excursion. We just don't have the data to distinguish the two at the moment, because this is all very new territory for all scientists working on this geomagnetics at the moment. We also have something else that you'll probably notice, and that is if you're out in the sun for just a short space of time, you'll notice that your skin will burn much quicker. You're probably going to get the same amount of dosage of sun rays in half hour as what you would have 30 years ago in the whole day. So on that note, if you're going out to do a little sunbathing, because we all like to do that, at the end of the day you look a little bit more healthier, don't you, with a nice bit of colour to your skin. But just be careful, because you have to take into account that we are 25% or thereabouts already down on our protective magnetosphere, which is not good, which means you will burn much quicker, which means you will expose your skin to sunburns much faster. And then, if you are susceptible to cardiac arrhythmias because of the influx in cosmic rays affecting your cardiac arrhythmias, then you're going to be putting yourself at further risk. So try and keep the time down as we go through this transition, because at this point, just bear that in mind, we are 25% down on the protective magnetosphere. And then moving on to something else, we've been going through a magnetic reversal for 123 years, which is a long, sustained time, and it's not easy to calculate how much upper atmosphere we have lost, but it may well have thinned almost by about 25% over that period of time, which is not good, because that magnetosphere is what keeps the biodiversity alive on our planet. And now you're probably getting an idea why, a lot of these organisations won't talk about this, but there have been some very good production companies, and I'm going to mention just one of them, Nova, that have done some very good videos on this and lightly touched on the causes and effects of which we could experience. And they do talk about the fact that if we was to lose totally our magnetosphere for even a short period of time, what the hazards of that would be. And I'm sure you don't need me to spell that out for you. If you've been following me long enough, you'll already be aware of what the hazards are. And just to briefly mention, if you're new onto this channel, those two can be very quickly mentioned as cardiac arrhythmia and cancer. And that's just related to all biodiversity on the planet, and that is setting aside all the climatic events that are, also going to be affected. As we already see in the last 30 years, dramatic changes to our climate on our planet, which is displacing, as we speak, hundreds of thousands of people. I kid you not. This is a very real anomaly that is taking place. One of the rarest anomalies that takes place as part of the normal processes our Earth goes through. But nevertheless, it's at our front door right now. Now, I just want to talk about something. A lot of people, believe it or not, and I know this is hard for a lot of people to get their head around it, still believe that the world governing bodies, our politicians, have our best interests at hand. But how many adverts have you seen run on your TV in the last year, last 2 years, last 10 years, telling you to reduce your exposure to solar radiation and sun tanning, on that, when you're on the beach, when you're in your back garden, or you're working? You've not seen any, have you? You won't hear it on commercials on radio stations, and you won't hear politicians talking about it. And that is how much they actually care about your well-being. They'll talk about everything else, whilst this thing is taking place in the background, and it is affecting every inhabitant on this planet across all biodiversities. You would think that if they had our best interests at heart, they would say, general public, due to the Earth's magnetosphere weakening 25% currently than it normally is, we are experiencing more solar radiation inbound through a thinner atmosphere and a weakened magnetosphere. And for that reason, you need to reduce your exposure down to minimal levels, because it is going to continue to reduce our upper atmosphere and thin it even more. It is going to continue to weaken our protection, our primary protective field, the magnetosphere. And as a result of those two things, cancer rates are going to increase, and cardiac arrhythmia is going to increase. If they had the best interests of ourselves at hand, they would say that. My advice to you is cut the exposure right down. I know you want to look good, you want to have a great suntan, it's beautiful when you're out there having a barbecue with your family and your loved ones. Just bear in mind that we have lost 25% or thereabouts of our protective shield, which has over the last 120 years weakened our atmosphere or thinned it down and weakened our magnetosphere. So put some sun protection on and look after yourselves. And that is why we say at this channel here and at our observatory, we are actually helping save people's lives. Because literally, if people understand what we've just said to them, they will do exactly what we recommend. Cut the exposure down. Don't go out there all day sunbathing. You know, think about your little ones, get some sunblock on them. And, you know, the only other thing to say is that this is going to continue to get worse. And, you know, although you might not be caught up in the climatic events that can directly affect your life, you can help reduce, you know, things like skin cancers down by just cutting your exposure. And I think you'll all agree with me today that that is probably the best advice I have given in the last 6 months at least. And I think this is something that we should talk more about on our channel, so that we drum it home to people about the effects of what's going on. Because look, the big organisations that are responsible for global health and welfare are not even mentioning it. Let's face it, they're not mentioning it at all. Bizarrely enough, they will not mention it. Why is that? Why the hell is that? Well, we'll do our bit here, and you guys can help if you want to do your bit as well by keeping our observatory going with even the minimal funding. You know, we've learned to ration whatever we get here and make it stretch as far as possible. I mean, it is a miracle we're still here today, and it's a miracle that we've got the equipment to monitor this major event which is taking place, which everybody else in the mainstream science industries and organisations and mainstream media have totally neglected to realise the importance of this. So there's a link down there, guys. The only other thing for me to say is, you know, protect yourselves, protect your loved ones. Think about the 25% reduction of the magnetosphere strength, which has weakened our upper atmosphere and reduced it down to the levels it has. And guys, the only other thing for me to say is, you know, you take care as always. Bye for now.